Hey guys, so welcome to the live stream. I haven't done a live stream in ages, so there's always that, a bit of live stream jitters. But maybe we'll wait until some more people join and we'll get started. In the meantime, I'd love to hear, who's here, where you guys are from, and all of that. It's always cool, getting an idea of who's watching. So yeah, I'll wait until maybe a bit more people join. In the meantime, what I could do is maybe I'll give a quick update on. Hey Max, how's it going, man? Hey guys, that's super. Hello everyone. Honestly, it's really cool, to talk a bit with you guys live. I think I actually haven't done a live stream in probably like 2 years. I'm good, Max, thank you. But yeah, I'd love to do them more often. I've always been saying it would be fantastic to do them more often, but I just never made time for it. But hopefully, like if I could do it even a monthly thing, it would be fantastic. Hey, hello everyone. Hi Eric, Heather, Jess. Maybe just as a brief starter, I'll give let's say an introduction or kind of a bit of a roadmap for short term on this channel. So I've only recently come back to publishing more often. I was really busy with some real life projects, studies and all of that. And at the moment, I'm publishing around like once every 2 weeks. Hey guys, Sweden, Serbia. It's really cool. We're kind of international. But yeah, I'm publishing once every 2 weeks, seeing where it goes. In terms of content, I'm still going to be doing Lord of the Rings stuff, but eventually I'd like to branch off to other fantasy materials. So now I don't know if I'm going to be doing them on GeekZone or if it will be its own channel. So for example, I'd love to cover some Dragon Age lore and these sort of things. But yeah, that I think it would be a question for another time. Hey, Big Joe. So in the meantime, guys, if you'd have any questions which you'd like to shoot over, I'd love to answer something. Even if it's related to the channel. I had a ton of people, like probably for the past 6 months, people were asking me a bunch about the whole Lord of the Rings on Prime series and my thoughts on it. And so perhaps I'll discuss it a bit in today's live stream. But yeah, maybe I'll wait a bit more. I don't know, to be honest, I really should have maybe prepared some questions beforehand. I think maybe on Patreon or on something, because that would have helped. Or should I be scrolling? Hey, Big Joe. Honestly, I'm doing quite well. Actually, because again, I was really busy in the past few months because I was working on learning game design and game narrative. There's something I've actually been studying for around 5 years, but to actually break in the industry, it's tough. And I obviously had to focus a ton of studies on there, and that's why I couldn't spend too much time on this channel. But apart from that, I'm doing quite well. I'd hope to be able to even improve even the amount of content, the frequency, because that is a real pity. Before I used to publish every week, but it's not feasible with the amount of research that a video takes. It needs much more time. I'd need 2 weeks. Again, research honestly takes me around, I think 15 hours sometimes for certain videos, going through the books, organizing the information, seeing what's canonical and what isn't. In regards to Dune, Robert, honestly, I've only watched the movie and I think it's really cool. I spoiled some of the books because I was really curious how it will proceed, the story. And I wouldn't have a problem covering it. I just would need to learn much more about the universe, because then in terms of material I'm very familiar with, or I'd be very comfortable with my knowledge in, I'd say like Dragon Age really cool. And at the moment on YouTube, I think there's a lot of fantasy markets which are kind of saturated. So you have, let's say, like even Lord of the Rings at the moment, there's so many channels. It's such a growing industry, especially with the whole on Prime thing, that there's just so many content, and most topics have been covered. Or even Game of Thrones. It's something, I love the material, I find it really interesting, but it's been done so well before that I wouldn't feel like I'm bringing too much new to the table. And like even in terms of Dune, I've watched some videos on YouTube and there's fantastic material. So unless I feel I can really add something relevant, I wouldn't be as keen to cover it or as incentivized, because that idea of kind of laying a mark or discovering something new or piecing something together is really fun. And luckily when it comes to Lord of the Rings, the content is so vast, that there are so many books that there's always something new to discover, something new to try and piece together. And it's really hard to actually follow a character's entire storyline without doing all this research. But yeah, so maybe again, this Dune thing, I think the most likely one would be something related to The Witcher, to Dragon Age. Okay, yeah, there's actually like kind of suggested the Dark Tower books, and that's something I actually considered, because from what I heard, it's kind of dark fantasy, right? Which sounds really fantastic. Like I think it'd be super interesting to cover. Yeah. Again, welcome everyone. All the different countries you have. I think I missed a couple. Sorry, Switzerland, Canada. But yeah, and again, I appreciate it, Robert. Thanks. Yeah. I think, guys, to be honest, maybe I should discuss a bit the whole Lord of the Rings on Prime series, because I've had so many questions about it, and I always delayed it to a live stream. So honestly, while I'm discussing it, I'd love to maybe read some of your own thoughts on these things. Like, for example, what you thought about the whole music, the themes, if you like the changes. Because it'd be cool if it's like an ongoing discussion rather than just like, non-stop talking about one particular subject. So yeah, I guess when it comes to the whole Lord of the Rings on Prime, I wouldn't say high expectations. I came in, a bit cautious, but I didn't want to kind of label it immediately, because even, let's say, the Lord of the Rings, you had, Christopher Tolkien did not like the first trilogy. So there is that kind of thing of, okay, so when is an adaptation and any changes too much? And I wanted to give it, a fair chance. But yeah, I think it was definitely disappointing. And at first I was like, hey, okay, this is not too bad. But then, especially when you compare it to like House of the Dragon, the branch, of Game of Thrones, the quality is way better. The writing is way better. The only thing I think Lord of the Rings had, the Lord of the Rings on Prime, which they aced, was the music. And that's all onto Bear McCreary. He's a super awesome composer, and he did a fantastic job. So the music was great, but I felt I wasn't really engaged. Not much happened. The pacing was really off. The whole Galadriel, again, like if I thought they made some cool changes to Galadriel's story, and having her as a protagonist could have been interesting. I just don't get why they chose to go down that path or write her in such a way. Because even when it comes to changes, you had, let's say that kind of orc elven guy. He was a completely original character, and he was cool. I loved him. The more he was on screen, it was so interesting. And it might have been, I wouldn't say breaking the lore, but bending it. But they did a good job. It was cool in his character. But for most of the things, yeah, it was mainly a disappointment. Like, even the way they changed the whole dynamics of Numenor, Galadriel's interactions, Sauron's kind of obvious disguise, to a certain extent. It was messy, and especially when you compare it to other quality series that we were getting at the same time, again, mainly the House of the Dragon one, that was when I realized, hey, it's kind of bad. I hope season 2 is better, but we'll see. Again, Mithril was a mess. I agree with you, Max. And the whole elves dying out at one go. So they spent like 2,000 years fine, and now in the next few years or so, unless they get Mithril, they're screwed over. That really didn't make sense. I don't know. Honestly, the feeling I really got from the series is you had a wide array of writers, and some of them knew their stuff, and some of them probably aren't familiar with the material. Because then, I thought the dwarves were well done. And at first, the first time you see the orcs, they had a certain threat around them, which I felt was better than, let's say, the Lord of the Rings actor trilogy, But then it's kind of completely went derailed. So yeah, I guess maybe it comes with being a big production, Amazon having many different writers, many different trajectories, I guess, that they want to go with, and it just gets messed up. Maybe perhaps it's something similar to the whole recent Star Wars trilogy. You had three different directors who wanted to do their own thing, and there just was no connection. Honestly, Max, it's not a matter of diplomacy, because it's one of the reasons, I never covered the series. I didn't feel that inclination. I just wanted to give it a fair shot, but I was wholly disappointed. When the last 3 episodes were coming out, there wasn't much excitement from my end. I was excited for the first few. After that, I was like, they're out, I'll watch them, but there isn't that hype, to the last hour. Yeah, it's coming out, I'm gonna watch it first thing. But I don't know, because I'd love for it to be a success. I love Lord of the Rings, and if we get more of this material, more about the world, it would be great, just if it's done well. And the Rings of Power, considering the budget they had, yeah, it was a massive disappointment. There's no way around it. And I don't mind changing canon. I'm not like some hardcore purist where I want everything to be perfect, because changes have to be made to adapt something and make it interesting. There has to be changes. We had it in the Lord of the Rings, and I think it was better for as a movie. And even the games, you have, let's say, the Shadow of War series, they make a mess of the lore, but they stand alone in a great way, that the game is great, and I like the twist they went with the story, so I don't mind changes, just that they make sense. But yeah, hopefully season 2 would be better. My hopes are they'll learn from this backlash, but I'm always going to be a bit skeptic, because I'd rather avoid a massive disappointment. We'll see. Again, with the work they had and the time period, they could have done so much more. Yeah, I read book. Yeah, we discussed it. What I wish they did was even let's say the Numenor storyline. What I would have found really cool is if you want to show a dynamic of a conflicted Numenorian, show their interactions with, for example, the Men of the South, the Haradrim, when rather than treating them well, they started to enslave them, use them for gifts, money, they took their resources. And I thought that would have been really cool. We get to see a darker side to Numenor. We get to see even kind of, I guess, a more sympathetic light to some of the bad factions, if you want to call them that, the Haradrim, Southrons, and that would have been cool. But instead, they just kind of rushed to a single storyline without immersing us in the world. But yeah, let me just follow up some comments, sorry. In regards to the Hobbit movie, Sky, honestly, I was wondering if I judged them too harshly. I remember the first time they came out, I went watching them with the hype, excitement, and expectation of The Lord of the Rings, And so I was a bit disappointed, but I wonder if I was kind of aiming for something which wasn't possible to do. And after the Rings of Power, I want to maybe give them another shot, watch them again, and just get a new opinion. I don't think they compare to The Lord of the Rings. I think in terms of content, it couldn't. The Hobbit as a book or as a story, it's hard to match the grand saga of The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, I think maybe I judged the movies harshly. So before I'd have said they're like a 6 on 10. Now maybe I'll up it to a 7. Yeah, honestly, and also when it comes to The Hobbit, something which I see brought up often, that there was the whole, Peter Jackson and Del Toro. Initially, Del Toro was going to be the director for the Hobbit trilogy. They had a bunch of assets ready, a bunch of storyline, a lot of preparation, and then Peter Jackson had to just come in and adapt. So yeah, maybe it wasn't too much on him, because I find it really strange that you had Peter Jackson who did an amazing job in The Lord of the Rings. And he understood the material. They understood what to adapt and what not to. And for him to kind of mess up with The Hobbit to a certain extent, it seems odd. So I wonder if that different direction was in the show. In regards to watch parties, yeah, that would be cool, Jess. So maybe I'll try and organize something. We'll cover maybe a movie a week. We'll see. On Del Toro being kept, I don't know if I'd have preferred it over Peter Jackson. I think it would have been really cool to watch, but then I wonder if Del Toro's style, I find he's great for a twisted, unique type of horror, and I'm not sure if that could be adapted well to The Hobbit. Honestly, I think it would be fantastic for some small storyline set in Middle-earth. So if you have something about the Barrow-wights and the Barrow-downs, I think Del Toro would be fantastic. I think it's right up his alley, right up the kind of movies he normally makes and the normal types of creatures. So there are areas where I think Del Toro could excel, but I don't think The Hobbit was like a natural ground for him to show his talent. Yeah, again, it would be curious. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there was anything on Del Toro's Sauron before or anything. But yeah, it would be interesting. Also, honestly, when I think about The Lord of the Rings, I'm not sure if you guys ever saw some of the development diaries of the trilogy. There were a few issues that they really dodged the bullet, and so sometimes I wonder if The Lord of the Rings was. I'm sure they were talented, but also there were a lot of happy accidents, kind of, because they had some ideas which, if they made it in the film, I feel would have been a poorer watch. So, for example, in the Battle of the Black Gate, Aragorn, instead of fighting a troll, he was going to fight a physical embodiment of Sauron. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually see some clips of the original footage. And it just looked messy, And even from a storytelling point of view, the pinnacle of the movie, and let's say the real hype train, is behind Frodo and Sam destroying the ring. Having Sauron, the main villain, suddenly appear on the battlefield, from, again, a storytelling point of view, it might sound cool, but it detracts from where our focus should be. So again, it's like a happy accident that they chose to go against this. Similarly, I think Arwen was going to have a much bigger storyline where she was going to join the elves to Helm's Deep instead of Haldir, and I guess they wanted to give her a bigger focus in the story, which is fair. But having her reunited with Aragorn earlier than during their wedding, it just seemed off. I think Aragorn, he was focusing on his quest, and there was a sacrifice to it. If he became king, that's how he'd kind of earn his right to marry her, based on what Elrond said. So yeah, it's like there are these kind of happy accidents which are really fun to read about, and we're kind of lucky they never were, they didn't make it to the final cut. I'd honestly love to cover them in a video sometime, just discussing these changes and how I think they might have impacted the storylines. Yeah, I agree with you on Glorfindel Max. I feel as a story, he's such a cool elf. It's so unique. Assuming he is, the Glorfindel that returned after falling against the Balrog. It's a unique character, and it's a pity we didn't see more of him. But yeah, honestly, there are a ton of these small storylines which I'd love them to explore in a mini-series. So maybe in terms of Amazon, what I think might have been a safer idea is focus on smaller time periods in Middle-earth. Get the feeling of it, and once you capture that feeling, try and do something bigger. So for, like, one of my favorite parts in the mythology are usually, the history of Arnor and Gondor. If we had a series on the fall of Arnor, having, their civil war between Cardillan, Arthedain, Rudor, their wars for Amon Sul, the Witch King entering there, laying his influence, the Rudar falling under his influence and betraying the other kingdoms, it would have been fantastic. And for a series, it would be fast-paced, very interesting, and it's kind of a standalone story. While with the Rings of Power, so much was built as a foundation that season 1 was purely, almost, building the foundation for what's to come. And I don't think that works nowadays. You have to have something more fast-paced. So again, I'm not sure if it was a pacing issue on their end, if it was too ambitious. I'm going to keep comparing it to House of the Dragon because I feel when I was watching that, every episode something unique happens, the story progresses, and you're always kept at the edge of this on your seat, but you don't feel things are being rushed, unlike, let's say, the last season of Game of Thrones. So perhaps it was possible, just maybe writing and pacing, I'm not sure. But yeah, sorry I keep rambling on the Rings of Power. But honestly, ever since its release, I kept telling people, I'll discuss it maybe in a live stream. I didn't really want to cover it in its own video because there was way too much toxicity around it. And I was a bit, I didn't really want to go through all of that. It's either, if you like it, it's bad. If you hate it, it's bad. And I didn't want to feel as if I'm milking the series, for content. I just watched it and I'll move on from there. What I'm actually really looking forward to is that Dwarven game in Moria. That looks really, really cool. And I think as an adaptation, it might be one of the best Lord of the Rings games coming out. Guys, honestly, if you have any questions you want to throw in the meantime, that would be fantastic, because otherwise, for the most part, it's going to be me rambling. I'm not sure how interesting that is. Yeah, Derek, honestly, I can't wait to give that game a shot, man. Like, even playing it with friends, from what I've heard, it's a cool experience, What do you mean about the Fall of Gondolin? Sorry, Kai, like a series or to discuss? And again, guys, honestly, if you have any questions, because I really, really don't want to stay rambling on random topics, particularly even if you'd have any video suggestions that you'd like to see in the future, or what type of content you'd like me to make. Because I kind of moved away from the whole history stuff. I feel there's so many on YouTube at the moment and there are great quality ones. So for example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Nerd of the Rings. He does such a great job, the quality and everything. Like, his history videos are thorough, they're really well presented, they're fantastic. So I was kind of covering more questions or smaller parts of the lore, which I find is interesting, to try and that gives you guys something new. In regards to if I'd want to see it as a movie, Kai, honestly, I think it would depend on how they adapt it, or what because there are so many different versions of it. Like, I'd hate to see some of Tolkien's drafts where you have like hundreds of Balrogs and Balrogs riding dragons made of metal. I just don't think it would work as a movie or a series. And honestly, if they didn't manage to capture the second age well, the first age is much harder. So if it can work out, I'm kind of skeptical, honestly. It would be cool, I guess, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'd rather they stick to the Second Age for now. In regards to my interest in Tolkien, Dan, and what caught my interest, I remember, like, when I was young, I think I was probably around 5 or 6, my uncle used to read The Hobbit to us, and even The Lord of the Rings, and I had no idea what was happening. I just remember him telling me there's a good wizard, bad wizard. I wasn't really following the story, and for some reason I had the perception that the story was about collecting all of the rings. Luckily, I think I watched The Return of the King first at the cinema. I think I was around 10 or 11, and after that I got really into the books and the whole extended universe. And there used to be a great website. I think it was called Barrow, and it was a massive encyclopedia of Lord of the Rings, and you just go there, press like for it to find a random article, and I used to read it. Probably what helped a lot also, there was the whole Battle for Middle-earth series. It was like a PC game. I'm not sure if you guys played it, but it was a fantastic strategy game, and that really got me even more into the whole lore, the world. It used to be my favorite game for a time. Yeah, I think that's where it started. And then in terms of what caught my interest, honestly, I feel the movies did a great job, because there's that whole grand scale. You had, as a kid, it's hard not to feel inspired by Helm's Deep, the Rohirrim and The Return of the King. It's just super epic. And, the music is great. It was an amazing cinematic experience to grow up with. And as a child, these sort of experiences, they kind of inspire you and leave a mark. So that, and then I just fell in love with the world, I guess. So Catalog asked, will you be covering the fall of Numenor? So I think around 6 months ago, I had published a video on the rise of Numenor. It was one of my longest ones, and I think it's one of the coolest ones, honestly. So if you can, check that out. I think you'd love it. The plan was that eventually I'd cover everything about Numenor. There was going to be the rise of Numenor, the fall of Numenor, and then a bunch of stories that were set in Numenor. Because we do learn a bit about their kings, even their princes. Like, there was one guy who was great friends with Gil-galad, and he used to act as an emissary. There are some really cool settings. We just never really see much about it, because it's in the appendices, the unfinished tales. It's spread out really well. But yeah, I'd love to cover more of Numenor. So Alexa asked where Tolkien got inspiration for nature of Middle-earth. I think, again, this is, to be honest, just based on what I know, and I'm sure people would know much more, probably mainly around Britain, I guess, because even the Shire, I can't remember which area he mentioned, but it was related to the British countryside and that sort of lifestyle. And a lot of people, and I'm not sure if Tolkien himself had said it, had mentioned that a lot of Tolkien loved, mythology, folklore, and when the British, a lot of their folklore and mythology, like the Celtic one, it was lost when the Normans conquered Britain. I think Tolkien used to feel that was a massive tragedy, and he kind of wanted to fill the gaps with his own creation, try to add something. So I imagine there has to be a strong British streak to it, even more so because that's the story and lifetime he experienced. And to a certain extent, I do believe that great art is always inspired partially by a person's own story and lifestyle and life experience. So I'm sure it's mainly British. So Derek mentioned that the music of the Ainu would be weird to adapt. Yeah, I agree. It's the only way I can see them kind of doing it is that kind of you'd have like a voiceover and a kind of explanation, but I feel those things really work poorly normally, and especially if you're gonna showcase it to people who are not familiar with the works. Hearing how the universe was created through music, and then there's like this battle of song. I don't think people will like it if they're not familiar with the material, because it's very unique and it's kind of weird. So yeah, it would be almost impossible to adapt. So Crafty asked, so by the way guys, honestly, thanks for all the questions. I'm glad I don't have to ramble too much. So yeah, Crafty asked, what is your theory on the Barrow-wights? What race are they and how were they created? So in terms of the Barrow-wights, what they are, we do know they're the fallen kings and princes of Cardolan, perhaps even the nobility. And the Witch King had sent spirits to kind of live within them. In terms of what race and how they were created, I mean, the bodies are definitely of men, and I believe even the spirits are probably, they once belonged to men of Arnor. And the reason for this is, so we know that Sauron, he was known as the Necromancer, and the Witch King had his own control over white spirits, and he probably learned something from Sauron himself. And there's an interesting bit that when Merry is about to be sacrificed, I'm not sure if it's Merry or Pippin, in the Barrow Downs, he wakes up from a nightmare, and he was dreaming that he was a man, I believe of Fornost, and the men of Carndum came to attack him. So it kind of makes me wonder if the spirits that were inside the Barrow-wights were the spirits of these men that had fallen. Now, whether they were of the actual men of Angmar or Arnor, it's hard to say. Personally, I imagine it's more likely to be that of Arnor. I think it's kind of a twisted way for the Witch King to manipulate it. If maybe their memories or something, I don't know. Because then at the same time, it's kind of weird that he could take control or kind of imprison spirits of men that are good. It's kind of weird for the mythology since, they usually leave the spheres of the world to go near Iluvatar. But that's my theory, and that's what I felt there was the most evidence of. So yeah, Derek and Dan mentioned of Battle for Middle-earth that it was one of their favorites. Honestly, guys, I'd love to perhaps organize a small tournament again for the Battle for Middle-earth games, or even on Discord perhaps. We could start setting up lobbies for us to play against each other. It would be really cool. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. There is the Battle for Middle-earth Reforged. They're kind of remaking the game, and the quality looks fantastic. I'm really, really pumped to check it out. The thing is, they've been working on it, I think for 4 or 5 years, and we haven't seen gameplay footage in a while. So at the moment, from what I was seeing, the community is kind of on edge. They don't know if it's still gonna come out or what's gonna happen. But hopefully, if it ever comes out, I'd love to play with you guys. Honestly, it's such a great game, man. It'd be fantastic. So Matthew asked, do we know if the Barrow-wights are always a problem after the Lord of the Rings, or does Aragorn? 1 second, sorry guys, I'm lost. Sorry, Matthew, if you could explain what you mean by it, maybe I'll try and answer the question, because I'm not quite sure. And even Max, about the magic on Lord of the Rings, what are you comparing it to? So Alexa mentioned that Celtic mythology is one of her favorite, the Nordic. Mine too, Alexa. I wouldn't say unfortunately, but I'm mainly familiar with Roman mythology and Greek mythology, and I feel they're probably well, not probably, they are the most prominent in Western society. So a lot of our stories borrow from them, and I think we can learn a lot from checking out other mythologies. So, for example, I work as a game designer and narrative designer also. And especially for narrative, I do try to draw inspiration from Nordic, from Japanese mythology, from Egyptian, because what's really cool is their perception on mythology is very different from ours. So, for example, when it comes to Nordic, something I feel is interesting, you have creatures that they're not really bad or good. They're very neutral. There was this kind of witch in the woods that would sometimes help people, sometimes kidnap kids. It's kind of twisted, but it's very great. There's a black and white, there's a mystery to it, and I enjoy that, especially for the creature designs. It's a really cool thing to learn about. While Greek mythology, it's usually quite clear cut. Okay, this is a bad monster. This is a good monster. This guy's a hero, perhaps a tragic one or a fallen one. But it's a lot more clear cut, which makes for cool stories, but they kind of get repetitive. So Jess asked, do YouTubers still collaborate? Yeah. The thing is, I think we'd all love to collaborate, but we don't make time for it. So for example, I've taken part in some live streams with Philosopher Games, with the Red Book, and even with Dan. And it's a great thing, because especially the way we analyze or read the material, or our passions are very similar. It's quite scholarly, so it's really fun and you learn a lot. Like, I'm not sure if the Red Book is still here, but if you guys don't know his channel, honestly check it out, because they're great, both the Red Book and the Philosopher Games. Like, whenever I'm unsure about something or an interpretation or anything, I usually reach out to Chris, the Philosopher Games, or the Red Book, because they're fantastic. Like, great scholars. Subscribe and check them out. I think in terms of knowledge, they're the best in the community. So I'd love to do more collaborations. We'll just have to figure out on what. There were a couple of ideas I used to play about with. Like, I wanted to do a kind of, not a quiz show with other Lord of the Rings YouTubers, to see these like really weird questions, how far they can get. But I'd love to do it. It just takes time to organize. So I just have to stop being lazy and be a bit more proactive and get it done. Yeah. So Dan asked, what mysterious part of Middle-earth is currently on your mind, and what do you wish you had more source information on? So in terms of mysterious part, and I guess honestly these two kind of overlap, and the source information, there's a continent known as the Dark Continent, which is kind of to the south of the landmass of Middle-earth. And I really wish we could learn more about it, because we kind of don't know much about it. Some people speculate that the Numenorians reached this land because there's a quote that they kind of had explored the entire map until the gates of night. So they must have passed by the Dark Continent, but we don't know anything about it. There's again speculation that perhaps it was related to Ungoliant, and it sounds cool. It's something. I love this sort of stuff. I love mysteries, and I like the darker aspects of Middle-earth. So if you ask me, my favorite stuff are always like the Barrow-wights, the Silent Watchers, the whole army of the undead. The Oathbreakers. Those are my favorite parts. I like dark things. I don't know why I'm drawn to them, but I'd love to learn more about these things. Honestly, that's I think the biggest pity when it comes to the Lord of the Rings, is that we won't get new material, and that upsets me, because I'd love to learn more about the world. I wish. It's a pity, It's like what we'll get. Sure, that sometimes we get Tolkien writings which are grouped together as books. Maybe some new documents we never saw, but as a saga, it's over, and it's sad. I just wish there was more to it. We have it, which is again ironic, because there's so much to it. But I guess when you have too much of a good thing, you want more. But yeah, it's a pity. Yeah, that'd be great, Derek. Honestly, if you could organize some games on Discord, that'd be really cool. I'd love to take part. I tried to get some friends of mine who never played BFME, but they felt like the game was a bit too old in terms of the response and all of that. But I'm sure people who have played it before or are into the Lord of the Rings would love it. So if we get that going, it would be fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Dave, man. I appreciate it. And even Max, I'm glad you enjoyed the channel. Oh, sorry, Matthew. Okay, I get it. So Matthew asked if Aragorn tried to get rid of the Barrow-wights after he's king. I don't know, because like when you think about it, so if Aragorn, he did restore the northern realm of Arnor. So I imagine that we know for a fact he restored Annuminas. I would imagine he also restored Fornost, because Gandalf kind of mentions it in passing to Butterbeer. No, Butterbeer? Man, Barliman. He kind of tells him that a king will return and Fornost, will be restored. So, yeah, we know that for a fact Arnor was restored. If Aragorn could somehow remove the Barrow-wights, that's... I don't know, like... I can't see how he could do it, like is he going to just go there and break into it and get sunlight? It's kind of weird. Perhaps, who knows, maybe their magic was also removed once the Witch King perished. Maybe that enslavement of spirits was freed. It's kind of hard to say. So maybe he didn't even have to solve it. If they were created, it's like kind of the ring. Once the ring is undone, everything that was created with its power is destroyed or freed. So perhaps the Barrow-wights had something similar, because I can't see how Aragorn could have, a clear out. It's not like he's clearing out his attic. The Barrow-wights were quite nasty, and it's kind of impossible for him. And Tom Bombadil wasn't going to help with that. But yeah, honestly, I'd settle with that idea of them being freed after the Witch King was destroyed. I feel it's quite plausible. But yeah. Oh yeah, definitely Max. Like LotR was fantastic. It was super awesome. So Crafty mentioned that. Sorry, I suspect that Morgul wounds trapped men of Arnor in a wraith state when they fell in battle. Possibly. There's this thing, honestly, and this was a video idea I was going to play about with. Trying to distinguish between wraiths, spirits, and kind of ghosts in Middle-earth. Because like I always imagine the wraith is a being that it's like take the ring wraiths. They still have a physical form, but they've been transported to the physical plane of existence. And I imagine a wraith would be similar to that. In regards to, but then you have a spirit would be, it doesn't have a physical embodiment, it just fully exists in the spiritual world. You get what I mean? So I always imagine they're more likely to be spirits rather than a creature that was attacked or stabbed with a Morgul blade. Again, that's just like an assumption on my part. So yeah, Dave asked, do you have a favorite quote from any of the books or Tolkien himself? That's a hard one. Because like one of my favorite quotes from the books is actually because of the whole adaptation in the movies. You have when Gandalf describes the Undying Lands to Pippin, that the whole grey curtain of this world draws back. I think it's very beautiful. So I think that one would be my favorite. And then like in terms of the movies, we had so many great quotes. Like I think Sam's speech is beautiful in The Two Towers. You have the whole Ride of the Rohirrim, Theoden's speech in the Pelennor Fields. But yeah. So Kai mentioned of Beowulf. Yeah, like I had read it briefly when I was a kid, like when I was 14, and you could see the inspiration. I'd love to cover perhaps a video, the inspiration that Tolkien might have drawn from it. So Success said, hi Scarl. Hi man, my name is Carl though, and I'm sorry for the confusion. Like this has been an ongoing thing ever since I started the channel. Unfortunately, when I say hey guys, it's Carl here, there's an S somewhere, and I've become Scarl also. But I'm cool with it. It can be Scarl, Carl. We'll rock both of them. Thanks, Sky man. I'm glad you like my content, dude. So Dan said and asked, if you could bring one thing from Middle-earth to our Earth and experience it for real, what would it be? So okay, the easiest thing to answer would have been the whole Shire, but I'm sure if I gave it enough thought, there's something cooler, because the Shire is peaceful. It's a great place to relax. But when you think about it, it's not somewhere I'm gonna go and I'm gonna be like completely blown away. I think we kind of adore the Shire because we work so much nowadays, or our lives are so busy, that the thought of this peaceful green land, all the hobbits, some ale, food, it just sounds really awesome. But if I had to bring one thing, and so this, I'm sure if I gave it enough time, I could come up with something which is much more fitting. Because like, take Minas Tirith. If you have a city which looks like Minas Tirith, that would be my top destination to travel to. It's fantastic. It would be so cool. And like, magic would be fun, but only I'd want to cast some magic, So the whole elven experience, I don't know, it's tough. And even in terms of creatures, like, there aren't many creatures I'd really want to bring. The great eagles, I'll pass. Then you have fell beast, Mumak. So yeah, it's probably a place, but I have to figure out what place. So Nathan MacDonald asked, could Fingolfin beat Sauron in the Lord of the Rings story? I mean, I would imagine, he was one of the greatest elven warriors. He held his own against Morgoth. I imagine he could beat him like in a physical fight. Okay, let's put it this way. Gil-galad and Elendil managed to hold off and beat Sauron, even though it came in a horrible draw and everyone died. So the question is Fingolfin a better warrior than Elendil and Gil-galad? So maybe it would have been similar. I'm sure it wouldn't be easy, because there's no doubt that Elendil and Gil-galad were also great warriors. But I imagine he could beat him. Just it would be a very tough fight. So Robert asked, what do we know about the Kingdom of Arnor? So there's so much to mention, and honestly, Robert, if you're unfamiliar with it, I'd tell you to, check out some of the wikis. There's the Tolkien Gateway, it's a good one, but even then, they kind of summarize information a lot, and you'll be missing out a core part of the story. So perhaps check out the actual books and the appendices, because it's an amazing story. Like, it's fantastic. So just to maybe give you a brief overview. So Arnor, it used to be, it was one kingdom. And I think after the death of the 8th king, the kingdom got divided into 3 different kingdoms, and each one was ruled by his sons. And there was Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudor. And all of these three kingdoms used to fight against each other. There was like a kind of civil war, because they wanted to conquer Amon Sol, which was Weathertop before it was destroyed, because it held a Palantir. And for the most part, Amon Sol was held by Arthedain, which was like the main kingdom. But yeah, then the Witch King, Sauron, he wanted to kind of mess with the Dunedain, but Gondor was way too strong, and since Arnor was already fractured, he sent the Witch King to occupy Angmar and launch a massive war against these kingdoms. And then you have, for example, Rudor. It was the first one to fall because they kind of became allied with the Witch King. A lot of the Dunedain had left these lands, and they were ruled by, I think, the Hillmen. And and then this kind of civil war escalates. So Rudor falls, and then the Witch King starts to attack Amon Sol. He destroys it. And eventually all 3 of these kingdoms fall. And the Witch King is defeated by an alliance between Gondor, Rivendell, and the elves of Lindon. Like, they group up and push against him. Again, it's a quick summary because I'd have to ramble for like an easy 20 minutes to cover it all, but it's a fantastic story. I think, again, unfortunately, we really underestimate the amount of history there is in Arnor and even Gondor. You have Gondor's own civil war, its initial relationship with the forefathers of Rohan. Like, there's so many cool stuff. It's fantastic. Jess, I don't know why, man. The Skarl thing is, it's common. And I remember there was a time where I was so preoccupied with trying not to make it sound like Carl that I was Scarl, that I was putting emphasis on the C, and for some reason it just kept going as Scarl. But yeah, it's Carl, guys, like Carl. Sorry, Karl. But again, Scarl works for me at this point. I've embraced it. Guys, we've had honestly a bunch of really cool questions, and especially the one of Derek, of which area you'd like to bring of Middle-earth. It's really cool. So if you guys have any ideas on it and want to share them, I'd love to hear some thoughts to get some even inspiration from my end. So Octelian asked, okay, but who is the ultimate greatest of all time elf? You know, I would say depends on what. Like, this is, again, unfortunately, I'm massively biased, and my answer is gonna be very controversial. Like, I love Feanor. I know he's a bit of he's not the nicest guy, and he's quite you know, a ragey, angsty elf, but he created the Silmarils, and even with all that, like, there's a quote in the books where Morgoth goes to Feanor's door, and I believe Tolkien says that Feanor closed the door in the face of the most powerful person in Narda, powerful being. You know, he to put it bluntly, you know, he didn't take shit from anyone, and I like the guy. He's a funny elf. Well, funny. I like his character. I like the darker elf side. I find it cool that we see this, a darker elf. You know, he's not the goody elf. He's proud. He kind of merits, I guess, that pride. You know, he's a great inventor, and even all of his actions, when you think about it, they saved Middle-earth. If the Noldor never went to Middle-earth, you know, Morgoth would have had free reign to do what he wanted. So it was for the best. It was with terrible intentions. Like, even when, you know, he burned the ships and screwed over the other elves, it wasn't a nice thing. But I like the guy. So I'd say it's between Feanor and Fingolfin. Yeah, so let me see. So Crafty Spirit said, who do you think was the mysterious old man that sneaked upon Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas? Well, it wasn't Gandalf, you know, so it had to be Saruman. Yeah, I think it was Saruman, because you asked why did he leave his fortress for hundreds of miles away. And if I recall, I think Gandalf mentions it in the books. Saruman, he was impatient to see whether the Uruk-hai had captured the Hobbit, and he wanted to see what's happening. So he kind of went, you know, with a disguise. He entered Fangorn Forest to kind of spy or watch over the Uruk-hai and orcs. So it does make sense. You know, it's not just like he was wandering in Fangorn for, you know, nostalgia or just for a walk. He was, I suppose, distrustful of his own servants to a certain extent, or their own capacity or their skills or what would happen. Or maybe he was a bit, you know, cautious. But yeah, I think that, as far as I know, is canonical. So Nathan mentioned that Erebor would be incredible to see in the real world. And again, this is what I meant why I needed some inspiration, because on this I 100% agree. I would actually now replace my answer, instead of Minas Tirith, with maybe Moria, but maybe once it's restored, you know, before, without the orcs and Balrogs, or before its fall. Moria would be incredible. Erebor would be a second, definitely. But in terms of Dwarven kingdoms, Moria is like top, you know, you can't beat it. So Nomsky asked, are you playing LotR? And he mentioned that they just added a lot more areas. So I had paused for a while. I had actually got some friends into it, and we started new characters, and we had stopped around the Lone Lands because they were a bit busy with some other projects. But I'd love to pick it up again. And I'm really, really pumped for the new Angmar instances, the dungeons. Because when I first played, I think the Angmar dungeons, there was Uragart, there was Carndum, and I think, not Garta Garwin, that was Lone Lands. Yeah, but there were 2 more. But they were some of the best dungeons in LotR. So if we managed to capture that feeling, it would be really cool. They're doing a great job with the game. Like, there was a time where I was a bit skeptical that after they reached Mordor, like, what more could they do, you know? If you kind of defeated Sauron, how could a greater evil appear? But they're managing, you know, they did a great job. So yeah, I'm 100% gonna jump back in. What I really need to do, guys, is find a way to stay up to date more with the community. Because again, like, take LotR, it would be fantastic to play with you all, you know, have a small community meetup. Maybe we can start meeting up on, you know, playing on the same server. Because it's great, you know, it's always fun. We can do it, you know, in the middle of a live stream or something. Guys, again, if you have more questions, because we ran out and I'll end up rambling again. So honestly, shoot some over. So yeah, Ctelian mentioned that he loves Feanor also, and that the guy probably killed more Balrogs. Yeah, true. No, Feanor is amazing. If we have a story on Feanor, if Amazon does it, I'll give it a shot also. You know, I'll say, like, please don't mess it up. But we need our angsty Feanor, you know. It'd be amazing. Hopefully, if Amazon doesn't screw it up. So Nathan asked, where would you rather live at the height of their glory, Moria or Numenor? I think it would depend if I would be a human or a dwarf? Like, I love dwarves, and they're like my favorite race in Middle-earth, but at the same time, I can't imagine myself fitting in dwarven culture. It might sound stupid, but that whole idea of having a massive beard and stuff, I don't know, it's not my thing. So if I was a tourist in Moria, I'd probably pick Moria, because I think it's cool, but then Moria would get exhausting, that you don't see sunlight. Yeah, I guess, okay, so let's put it this way. As a tourist, it would be Moria. In terms of living, Numenor. I think Numenor is nicer, you know, you have the sun, the sea, you're human. Yeah, Numenor in that case. So Jess asked, have you submitted any nominations for the Tolkien Society Awards? To be honest, I've never done it, Jess, though again, it's something I should do. It's just, I'd be caught up, and usually my free time, I just dedicate it to researching more topics. But yeah, I'll check it out. I have no idea who's been nominated or for what. So if you want to share with anything of those details, I'd love to hear them. So Derek asked, on the topic of Feanor, who is your favorite son of Feanor? So I think in terms of the sons of Feanor, the ones that really stand out to me would be Maedhros and Maglor. I think Maedhros is the most epic, and the one who kind of he did his best to repair the damage of Feanor. Not really the damage, well, I guess the damage. I think he was the one, he would have seen his father's mistake, and he followed him out of honor and respect. But I like the guy. You know, the whole idea of, you know, him getting imprisoned, him losing a hand, continuing to be a great warrior, his friendship with the other kings of the Noldor. I think he's my favorite in terms of story, but also he's the one who's the most fleshed out. What I like about Maglor is, well, in the books we're told he takes after his mother a lot. He's a much more empathetic person than the other sons of Feanor. You know, he saw that their deeds were bad, and he wanted to betray the oath of Feanor, actually, but he kind of, you know, got convinced by his brother. So yeah, I think it's between those two. Maedhros is definitely cooler. Maglor, he stands out in his own way. Even like part of me wonders if he's kind of still alive in the whole, I guess, the present in Middle-earth, because we're never told that he died. He was wandering the shores of Middle-earth, singing sad songs. So yeah, I find them both quite interesting. But their father, Feanor, is still my favorite one. So Dan mentioned, I've heard it mentioned that the Watcher in the Water could be a nameless thing. How likely do you think that is, and what else do you personally imagine the nameless beings to be? So I actually covered this in one of my videos on the nameless things. What I do feel is worth mentioning, a lot of the things I can mention on this topic is speculation, like trying to piece together different parts of canonical material. And I'm emphasizing this because it's good to understand what is my speculation and what do we know. So if it is a nameless thing, personally, I think it's quite plausible. More so because the lake outside of the gates of Moria, it wasn't always present, and it only happened recently because I believe, I'm not sure if it was a rock or something had fallen, and you ended up with a dam, and that's caused this kind of lake to pool up, and there was a bunch of water which pooled up, and you got this lake. So where this creature came from, if the lake wasn't there, is kind of a mystery to me, which is why I think it's more likely to be a nameless thing. Because from the way I understand it, if you have like a ton of water in a pool, which suddenly appears and puts pressure on the earth, if the rocks are kind of weak, perhaps this water could connect to the sea or the pool of water or the lake actually below Moria, which is where we know the nameless things were. And we know there's a lake because Gandalf mentions that when he falls with the Balrog's fire is put out in this cold lake. So that's my theory, that this pool of water formed. Over time, it kind of eroded and found weak passages through the rocks, which formed a tunnel and connected with the kind of bottom lake below Moria. And then one of the nameless things went up there. It's worth clarifying that in the books, we're never told that it was like a squid-like creature. That only appears in the movie. In the books, we just know that there's a bunch of tentacles which appear, and that falls much more in line with what I imagine the nameless things to be. You know, it's this kind of weird, eldritch-like creature. But yeah, hopefully you find that plausible also. But honestly, like, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you think it makes sense or whatnot. So guess the best said, hey Carl, do you think Tom Bombadil could defeat Sauron if they were to fight in Tom's land? I don't really think so, but it's something, it's not hard to say, because Tom Bombadil isn't really a fighting kind of guy. If you ask me what I believe he is, he's kind of like the embodiment of Ea. So Sauron defeating him wouldn't really make sense either. He's like a personification. He's there. We're told he's the first thing and he'll be the last thing in Arda. So from my understanding, that kind of means once Arda is remade in the music, the new music toward the end of the world, that would maybe be the end of Tom Bombadil and he's made in a new way or something. So I don't really see him fighting Sauron. You know, it's like it's a matchup which would, I don't know, maybe like you could imagine Sauron just bonking him with his mace and Tom Bombadil being totally fine, but I just don't see Tom Bombadil fighting back. So let's say it's a draw. So Crafty Spirit said, would you rather live in Numenor under Ar-Pharazôn and Sauron, or in Moria with the Balrog? Well, yeah. So either way, I'm kind of screwed, no? I can't. So you okay? Let's put it this way. So what this question is really asking me is, would I either live for a while in Numenor and either be sacrificed to Morgoth or drowned in the fall of Numenor, or would I prefer getting barbecued by the Balrog in Moria. I would say Numenor, just because there's a chance I can escape maybe with Elendil. Maybe I'll be one of the guys on the fateful boats. Again, this cheating on my end. If I can't be on the boat, I don't know. I'm gonna be on the boat. I'm gonna be with the faithful on the boat with Elendil. So let's go the Numenor one. Guys, from the would you rathers I'm getting, you guys are putting me in really horrible situations. I need something where I don't end up too badly. So 8Arm asked me, would you rather be an orc in the service of Sauron or Saruman? I think definitely Saruman, because from what we see in the books, his orc human resources is a lot more generous. They're fed better. Again, an Uruk-hai in the army of Sauron. I think I'd be better off. Sauron's is just a mess, man. Like, when you read what the orcs did in Mordor, there were some orcs which were simply tasked with clearing the pathway to Mount Doom, which, because of the eruptions, there's a ton of rocks flying about which are destroying the path. Knowing my luck, I'd be one of those orcs cleaning up who gets squished by an eruption and a rock flying. So I'll pass on the Mordor. I'll have to go with Saruman, and hopefully he's feeling, he wants to be a nice boss to me, man. And Derek brings up a good point that they have menus in Isengard, so I have a choice of what to eat, which is magnificent compared to to the orcs of Mordor. So Corey MCG said, so from your videos I've learned how intricate the many plots in Lord of the Rings are. In your opinion, do you think this is something Tolkien pre-planned, or would he add elements that fit into the gaps later? I believe the latter is likely, that he had core ideas of the story, and then he said, okay, this would be fun, or this makes sense, and he adds to it later. And when I say I think, it's almost something we can say for certain, because in the books, not in the books, actually when we see Tolkien's early scripts and manuscripts, his son mentions that there were many ideas which were kind of scratched off, and that he wrote something else instead of it. So we can see he's always adapting. Similarly, when it comes to the orc origins, we have, I think, 4 or 5. So he's always adapting. He's always trying to fill in. And in his writings, there was something that if you give information about an object or a place, introduce a new mystery on the horizon, that don't give too many details about it, but let people fill in the gaps themselves. So, for example, and these are the passages, honestly, which I find most interesting. So, let's say there was a story, I can't recall his name at the moment, of a prince of Rohan. Honestly, I'm trying to remember his name because it was one of my favorite ones. Yeah, but basically he went into the pots of the dead as a bet, and when Aragorn passes through this area, they come across his skeleton, and he was like scratching against the door, and his sword was broken, and they find that his knees were also broken. So it's kind of speculated that the army of the dead broke his knees and left him there, like, to wander or something, I don't know, which is kind of messed up. And if I remember correctly, in one of Tolkien's notes, he mentions that behind this door there was an underground, like, labyrinth temple, which was used to worship Morgoth. And like this throwaway line, it gives us so much to think about, to wonder about. So yeah, it's like kind of his writing style. Give these grand or cool ideas and then slowly add elements, but never fill in all the gaps. Because this is something even you kind of practice in writing. The best stories, it's a living mythology. It's like our history. We have a broad idea of iconic events, but then there are bits and pieces where we're unsure, or there's that mystery, and it's the mystery which keeps the story alive, of people trying to speculate, of people trying to piece together, of solving that mystery. So if any of you are into writing, it's something I'd really encourage, man. Tolkien's a great inspiration in that regard. So let me see where I am. So Derek mentioned that the theory makes sense, and that he thought it was a Maiar or monster, which was cast underground, similar to the Balrog. I mean, it's definitely possible, because there were Maiar in the service of Sauron. But if it was cast underground, because like the Balrog escaped underground, so I don't know where it would have fled to. And even like if it was a land creature which used to be in service to Morgoth, which had to flee, it's kind of weird imagining it crawling all the way just to simply go into that pool one day, which is why I always felt it's more likely to have been in the lake beneath Moria. But yeah, it's definitely a possibility in regards to the Maiar thing. So Kai asked, do you think there is a connection between Tom Bombadil and Treebeard? It depends what you mean by a connection. If they ever met, it's definitely plausible. Because I believe Fangorn used to once be connected to the Old Forest. It was one giant forest, and Treebeard is one of the oldest ends. I think 3 of them are left, the oldest one from back then. So they might have interacted or met, once upon a time. But they're definitely, not the same person or something. That doesn't really make sense to me. Because like, why Treebeard of all people? It's a bit odd. So Nathan asked, what is your favorite and least favorite change that Peter Jackson made for the movies? That's tough. Because like the obvious answer to me would be the elves, Helm's Deep. Let's put Helm's Deep in general, because I'd have said the elves going to Helm's Deep. But if you read Helm's Deep in the books, it's much less eventful. While the movies, honestly, I prefer the Battle of Helm's Deep more than the Battle of Minas Tirith. In the movies, you have that, the atmosphere is cooler, and I don't know what you guys think. Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you'd prefer Helm's Deep or the Battle of Minas Tirith. So yeah, for me, I like that change. I think the elves are cool. There's that whole Lost Alliance, 2.0. It's a more dire situation. Like in the books, they weren't just conscripting people. They actually had a part of the army over there. The soldiers were more professional, so it seemed less desperate. So that would be my favorite. My least favorite change, because like my least favorite, it's hard to say how things would have played out. Because like, let's take Aragorn. His character has changed a lot from the books to the movies. In the books, he didn't have this reluctance to be king, while in the movies, he's almost trying to escape his destiny until the final movie, which is a disservice to Aragorn. It makes him more selfish, but at the same time, it makes it more interesting from a movie sense, so it's hard to judge. What I feel I don't like is the changes they made to Faramir's character. And I don't understand why they did it, maybe just to create tension, but it was unnecessary. If you wanted to create tension, just have them join the Osgiliath anyway, for a while. But the whole point of Faramir is that he knew Frodo was carrying the ring, and he was a dichotomy to Boromir. That we wanted to see, why is he different from his brother? So we missed out on that, and I didn't like that change. Probably that would be one of my least favorite, which comes to mind at the moment. Trying to think of more. Yeah, probably that, I'd say. Let me just see where I am, sorry guys. So Lirin asked, for who do you think the meteor shard that Thorin gifted to Bilbo was originally made for? If I recall correctly, it was for an elven prince. I think they mention it in the books. But in terms of which elven prince, like the easiest answer would be the ones of the elves of Mirkwood. Since they had a close relationship with the dwarfs of Erebor, when they were still at peace. So I'd have thought that, but again, it's always possible that it was for someone in Rivendell. It was always, well, it's a prince though. Yeah, that wouldn't make much sense. So I'd probably say, yeah, Mirkwood. Mirkwood is most likely. Yeah. Also, guys, on Mithril, it's kind of off topic. In the books, we know that Sauron used to hoard a ton of Mithril. Like Moria, for the most part, was completely scrapped of Mithril items for Sauron to hoard them. And I always wondered what he was doing with them. Like, what did he need all that Mithril for? He wasn't giving it to his units. Did he just like having this rare material that maybe he can one day use in his own forgecraft? It's just something interesting to think about. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So Florica asked, the favorite and least favorite king of Gondor. If this includes Isildur and I don't know, like my least favorite one would probably be Earnor, because of him, he kind of was proud. He attacked the Witch King in Minas Morgul, and he left the kingdom without a king. He was the last king of Gondor. So he messed it about, I suppose. So I don't like him just because of that. In terms of favorite, I guess, Aragorn's the obvious choice. I'm sure there are some cool stories from the kings of the appendices. I think there's one Eldarion, I believe, or Velakar, who was also quite cool. But Aragorn did everything. He reunited the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. He restored their glory. He definitely is the MVP of the Kings of Gondor. So Dan asked, since you're very interested in Tolkien's narratives and you work on narratives with your works, are you also writing your own stories in your spare time? So actually, Dan, my whole idea even behind my career choice is to one day tell the stories I want to tell. So hopefully if I could ever create my own game with my own story, that'd be beautiful. And I considered writing it instead of making a game out of it, which is possible. I have a ton of notes, and I was actually writing about it. There's a ton said, the factions are said, the setting is ready. But something I really love about games is when it comes to writing, when you're writing a normal book, you're limited to a written media. So if there's something in the background, if it's on the wall, if it's an Easter egg, you can't see it. I have to draw attention to it. In a game, I can tell the history, I can tell a story from the environment, from the music, from everything. The tools you have as a storyteller, as a game, are massive. And I think people sleep upon it a lot. Like if you consider the recent God of War game, its storytelling was top-notch, far better than a lot of full movies I've watched in the past. And they do it through this medium, the visuals, the music, the hints of stuff. It's amazing. So my idea would be that, make a game about it and perhaps release some writings to accompany it. But I am working on something, like it's a life project. Hopefully one day it's like a massive world. I'd love to share it with you guys, honestly, if it ever comes to that, but we'll see. Sorry guys, let me just see. So Rob asked the favorite Lord of the Rings meme. I'm going through the memes at the moment, which I'm familiar with. Meat's back on the menu, boys. I think that one's the best that I can think of at the moment. Oh no, actually, then there's a wizard is never late. I think the wizard is never late is the one you can always use. It's the most adaptable. Probably that one would be my favorite one. So Crafty mentioned, how do you feel about Dior, the son of Bern and Luthien? The way he dealt with the Feanorians was strange. I agree. I guess again it makes him a bit more of a unique character, a bit more conflicted. But it never struck me like there are movies and books where if you had a character simply speak, a problem could be resolved, and those are usually, I'd say, as poor writing, you know, which is something I hate when you have like a series where there's a misunderstanding, which could be resolved in 2 minutes of discussion. But in regards to Dior, I think he himself was a conflicted character. He wasn't really as noble as his father. And at the same time, maybe he knew that the Feanorians were stubborn. They would want the Silmaril, and the deeds they did to get it wasn't theirs anymore. You know, their claim to it was negligible, and he knew perhaps that trying to deal with them would only make a problem worse. So it's not too clear cut. But he's nowhere as noble or as a noble spirit as Beren. So Gez the Best asked, was it possible for the most powerful Maya to be stronger than the weakest Valar? Yeah, definitely. Like again, maybe I'm saying it with too much confidence, but we know for a fact, and people get annoyed by this, and I have to clarify, it's not speculation, but Tolkien said so himself, that Sauron at his strongest was more powerful than Morgoth at his weakest. And Morgoth was a pretty powerful guy. So if we're saying Sauron having to beat, let's say Nienna, or maybe not Tulkas, I think he's more powerful. Similarly, we know that Eonwe was the best warrior in Middle-earth in arms, and he was a Maya. So I think definitely they could be more powerful, stronger, just to be clear, stronger in terms of arms or weaponry or in a battle. In terms of more powerful raw strength, like raw natural power, I don't know. I think it's much less likely. But let's go with strength as in battle strength. So thanks, Dave, for the donation, man. I really appreciate it, dude. And he asked me, oh, thank you, it's a more comfortable dilemma. Spend your days in Lorien or Lothlorien. Wow, that's a difficult one. I think Lothlorien is fine. But yet, I really appreciate the positive dilemma, Dave. At least I'll survive there, And yeah, thanks, man. It's very kind of you. So Liren asked, another question that sometimes won't let me sleep. Is it possible that Legolas was related to Eleuthingol? I don't know. I mean, it depends how you think that'd be related. As far as I know, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, like Tranduil's line would technically, they're of the same house as Thingol. So if by related, it would be like some distant cousin, like distant nephew, whatever. It's possible. If it's like a son or something, I wouldn't see so. So Florica asked, why didn't Arthedain attempt to rebuild Amon Sol after 1409? Well, for the most part during that time period, there was like a constant tug of war between Angmar and the northern kingdoms. So I don't think it would have been a priority. And also, what I imagine their main goal would have been was establish a front against the Witch King. The resources needed to rebuild Amon Sol would probably have been too much. They also suffered, to be fair, Arthedain not as much as Cardolan, but there was the Great Plague, which I believe was in the 1600s, which decimated the population of Cardolan, and it also affected that of Fornost, but to a much lesser extent, so they had like other troubles. But yeah, I think that's why they would have definitely rebuilt it if they managed to defeat the Witch King earlier. Success, no, there's no difference. I think it was like a joke between them. Thanks, Kurt, man. I really appreciate the support, dude. Guys, if you have any more questions, I'm out at the moment. Otherwise, we'll go back to rambling. Perhaps what would be cool also, I could share some more future videos that I was working on in the meantime, honestly. But if you'd have more questions or things of that, it's really cool, talking about them. Something I was thinking of doing, guys, which it's been a long-term project, and I was actually gonna collaborate with another YouTuber on. We were going to try and recreate the final moments of Balin's expedition in Moria. So I was hoping to first of all involve the community where I can, find some people who can do a really cool dwarf voice. And if I can't fill in enough spots from there, I'd love to hire some people even professionally. And it'd just be fantastic capturing those final moments, the dread, hearing the drums in the deep, trying to imagine their conversations, the dwarves getting notified of the watcher that they were kind of trapped in. It's just a really, really cool thing, and the new type of video I'd love to explore. Because again, in terms of lore, I do feel there's just so much out there at the moment that I want to do something new and fun. And that sounds like a great idea. It's like something I've been working on for ages, and hopefully one day you guys will see it. So Florica asked, did Arnor have a council? If by council you mean like a king's council or advisors, we're never told if they had it, but I would imagine they definitely had something of that sort. It's so crucial nowadays. Not nowadays, sorry, nowadays we have a different type of council. It's so crucial back then as a king to have your, people knowing, the master of all that stuff. So I imagine it definitely had a council. So Lirin asked, how big could Ancalagon be? Must have been hundreds of meters and hundreds of tons. So this is a tough question, Lirin, because I'd love to imagine that Ancalagon was massive. And, he had destroyed the Tangorodrim peak beneath him. So I always imagined, this giant, massive dragon who's huge. But at the same time, perhaps he destroyed it because he fell, from high up, and even with a simple mass, kind of that velocity would cause a massive destruction. So it's hard to say. But just for the fun factor, let's imagine he's like a massive dragon, It's cooler, and he deserves it. It's Ancalagon the Black. He's the most powerful dragon. So Derek asked, favorite first age faction or kingdom? I imagine I'd probably have to go with Gondolin. I think Gondolin, because they were the great. Well, again, because sorry, man, this stumped me. Favorite first stage faction. Let's go with the Elves of Gondolin. They're the most powerful kingdom. They were doing their best to, to hold Morgoth off, and they did a great job for the most part. But then again, if you want me to be biased in terms of a faction, I like the Feanorians, for the reasons we discussed before. Derek, in regards to helping, I'd love to involve as many as I can, man. These community projects at this point, the channel for me is a hobby. I don't want to see it. I literally don't see it as a revenue source. It's just, I want to have fun creating things I love. So involving the community, this channel is yours as much as it is mine. So the more you guys take part, the more fulfilling it is, even for me as an experience. So Kai mentioned that he wanted to see a movie about Balin. Even me, man, like, for me, this is like similar to what I was discussing earlier. If we had a Lord of the Rings series covering all these cool topics, a bit about the Second Age, we can see the Balin's expedition, like a kind of mini series, 4 episodes covering different storylines. It would have been fantastic. Maybe not as grand, but we could build up to that. Then you could have this grand storyline after. But I'd love to see these things. It's epic. I don't know, the whole idea of the Dwarven last stand. In the books, I believe there was a bunch of bodies piled up near the main door. It'll be fantastic. It'll be cinematically, it'd be amazing. So Guess the Best asked, would Ungoliant be able to defeat Morgoth and the Balrogs if she had taken the Silmarils and consumed them? That's interesting again, because it's like quantifying how much more powerful should have become with the Silmarils. So just to give some background, guys, Ungoliant, hopefully you guys know who she is. She was like this massive spider-like enigma who absorbed light and grew more powerful, and gems kind of too. And yeah, she had eaten a bunch of gems that Morgoth had brought her, and she had gotten huge, and she threatened to destroy him, and she was even close to doing so. Well, not destroying him, but she could have consumed him, I suppose, because she wanted the Silmarils, but then the Balrogs came to save him. I would like to think that the Silmarils were since they were these powerful objects and their light was so significant, perhaps she could have, but then at the same time, we must keep in mind that Ungoliant had already drank the sap of the two trees, which contained the light of the Silmarils. So, technically, she already contained a good chunk of their power, and the Balrogs could still threaten her. So, if she ate the Silmarils contained the light of the trees also. So if they would have made a difference, technically, maybe now less so, maybe the Balrogs would have still been able to save Morgoth. Yeah. So Florka asked, how do you think Valandor of Arnor died? You'd have to remind me who Valandor is though. Let me just actually search up, because I'm pretty sure I heard the name. Let me see. So Valandor. Let's see. Sorry guys, I'm reading up. Oh, honestly, like I have no idea, man. I didn't even know. I was not familiar with him. But yeah, it's really cool. I'd love to read up on him. And it would be cool to speculate, but like I just googled his name. Apparently he died really violently, and we're not told how. It's cool though, I'll check it out. Sorry I can't answer it, but I'd love to do more research and give you a proper answer. So Nathan asked, did Tulkas take part in the War of Rat? For me this would be a given. Since he took part in the first battle, and Tulkas was the guy who was always like rearing to go after Morgoth, I can't see him not taking part in the War of Rat. Again, assuming the Valar also took part, because then there's that big question mark of, was the War of Rat simply the elves of Aman coming to Middle-earth's aid, or were the Valar and the Maiar present? I would like to think so. For me it would make sense. So Tulkas, he deserves his vengeance and to be proven right, you know, in his doubts and suspicions about Morgoth. So Rob asked, do you think that Gollum could be turned good, or was he a lost cause from the start? So in this thing, I would say, again, maybe it comes off as too confident, but at 100% say he could have been turned good. So there is a part in the books where Gollum, it was like at a changing point, where he would have actually saved the hobbits from going into Shelob's lair. And the only reason he doesn't do so is because Sam is rude to him, and he kind of snaps at him. But apart from this, Tolkien had a core philosophy that evil couldn't be more powerful than good. So if something evil couldn't be redeemed, but good could be corrupted, then it means that evil was inherent in, let's say that evil was more powerful than good, which didn't make sense to him, and it went against his philosophy. So I imagine that Gollum 100% could be redeemed. And just to perhaps emphasize the extent of this philosophy, when it comes to orcs, it was even one of the reasons why Tolkien felt they could be redeemed, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. But he felt orc redemption would have to come from Ilúvatar himself. So yeah, hopefully that's a good enough answer. It makes sense. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So Florica asked, what if Húrin died and Húr was captured? Well, that's a tough one. I imagine the biggest change would have been Gondolin actually surviving for well, not actually active, but then you have, I don't know. I don't know. Again, it would be a cool video to discuss, but I'd love to do a proper what if scenario, trying to see exactly how would their paths have changed, because in this video it would be like more recalling the change, the core parts of their storylines, which I remember. So I don't think it would do it justice. So Derek asked, what's your opinion or take on the theories about Dagor Dagorath? So in terms of my opinion, I like to see it as canonical, even though, there's that kind of question mark, is it real or not? But I don't know, I like this whole idea of Morgoth escaping and there's this final return, and then it's like everything bad that happened is kind of restored. So Feanor is freed, because for those of you who don't know, elves, when they die, they go to the halls of Mandos and their spirit is healed, and finally it can walk again in a man. While in Feanor's case, he was doomed to remain imprisoned kind of in the halls of Mandos until the end of the world. And according to the prophecy of Dagor Dagorath, at the end of in this apocalypse of Arda, after Morgoth's defeat, Feanor would be freed, and the three Silmarils would be recovered from the earth, the sea, and the sky, and Feanor would break them apart, and he'd restore the light to the two trees of Valinor. For me, it's like poetic. It's kind of a restoration, and then the whole world of Arda would be remade and like purified. It would be Arda, I think Arda, not renewed, there's a word for it. But it's like the perfect way that Arda was supposed to be originally. So honestly, I love Dagor Dagorath, and I like to see it as canonical. Yeah. So Crafty mentioned that the Silmarils would have evaporated her guts since they were hollowed. True, that does make sense. I don't know. It depends, I guess, on how powerful she was, because, true, that's a possibility. Technically, yeah. I'm not sure. Again, it's hard to say. Would she have been strong enough to kind of overcome them? Because then, even to be fair, even Morgoth himself was burnt by it. Yeah, that's actually though an interesting point. Thanks for bringing it up. Thanks, Dan, man, for the donation again, dude. I really appreciate the whole support. And actually, I'll read it up. Sorry, that I should be doing that. So Dan said, thank you for all your great content over the years. I always look forward to watching your videos, and I share your interest of the dark areas of Middle-earth. Cheers, mate. Again, the dark areas, man, are the most fantastic. And hopefully, in the future books, not in future videos, I can discuss more of that sort of material, even if it isn't Lord of the Rings related. Again, that I just love dark material. I find it more interesting. Honestly, guys, just on a brief point, something I hope is noticeable, but again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. In regards to my newer videos compared to the older ones, would you notice a difference in audio quality? Because there was a time where I used to kind of be so self-conscious about enunciation, about being clear, that my speech pattern was really stunted and it sounded very artificial and all of that. And I feel like the newer videos, I've kind of entered a really relaxed setting, I suppose, and I feel they've improved a lot in terms of audio, but I don't know if it's noticeable, if it's maybe me overthinking it, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So let me see. Sorry guys, I have to catch up with the questions. That's fine, yeah. Sorry guys. So Success asked, is there any lore about Boromir's horn? And can it be heard all across Gondor? Real cool object if there's more. Yeah, so as far as I know, so I believe Boromir's horn, it belonged to, I think, the first steward or his son, and they had gotten it from hunting these like great beasts in the east, which I imagine was near Rune. And And yeah, they had hunted it, and this horn was fashioned out of one of its horns. So that's what we know. But yeah, it's a really, really cool object, and I love this whole historical significance, that it's been passed from father to son for all these years. And the steward that hunted these beasts, they were known, like he was the steward who was famous as a hunter. But I think that's all we know about it. In regards to it being heard all across Gondor, I'm not sure if I imagined it, but I think when Boromir had blown his horn, I'm not sure if they mentioned that they had heard it on the borders of Gondor. But I always saw it as more of a metaphorical thing, that wherever you are in Gondor, it's such a powerful horn that someone there would hear it and come to your aid. But that's just my interpretation of it. Yeah. So Florka said, thoughts on a new Shadow adaptation. I would go with Tolkien's own kind of conclusion on it, that he wasn't happy with men becoming, again, let's say, the generation of men after like 2 generations, I believe, or 3 generations after the end of the Lord of the Rings. So he wasn't really happy with that, and I feel it would be really hard to do it justice, without a big villainous Sauron. I guess it makes sense that he abandoned it. Like, I'd have wanted him to write more material, but I don't think I wanted a new villain after Sauron. I'd have much preferred us learning more about, again, the Dark Lands, about the First, Second, and Third Age. So I think it's for the best that it was abandoned, and I wouldn't want to really see an adaptation of it. Florica also asked my thoughts on Caranthir. Again, I think he was the 4th son of Fëanor. I don't really think he stands out much. Like, I'm not a fan. I'm definitely not a fan of him. He wasn't as bad as some of his brothers, but yeah, I don't like the guy. For me, the sons of Fëanor that really stand out are Magdor and Maedhros, and you have Curfin. Yeah, I just don't like him. Yeah. I'd love to do a video on all of the sons of Fëanor sometime, but yeah, I don't like the guy. So Tef Nenes asked, "Hi Carl, what kind of demons are there in Arda besides the Balrog? And do you know some? I have read there are in Autumno." So in regards to demons, I don't, as far as I know, we're not really mentioned. None of them are really mentioned, as an example. But again, what I find really cool is, in terms of orcs, some of the weakest Maiar actually took on an orc form, and they would have almost a demonic energy about them. And these orcs were so powerful that, they were stronger. They were like a massive threat. And we're told that normally orcs which were slain, like they had a name. Let's say it was, let's say Radbag. I'm sorry, that's the first name which came to mind. If this orc's name reappeared after a generation or so, it probably was the same orc, like the same Maiar spirit that slowly reformed. And that's really cool, like that you had these old school demonic orcs. It was like a really cool idea in the books, which I wouldn't mind seeing it, in a series or something, or it being brought, like if it was brought up in the Rings of Power and explained, I'd have been down with it. Like this massive orc general who's a real threat. It would be fantastic. And it's canon, it's canonical. That's the only like demonic energy I can think of in terms of named creatures or beings. So Watcher asked, what made you interested in Lord of the Rings, and what would have your field of interest, and what would have been your field of interest without it? So what made me interested was my uncle used to read the books when I was younger, and when I first watched the movies, The Return of the King, when I was like 11, that really piqued my interest and I got into it. And what would have been my field of interest? To be honest, I don't think Lord of the Rings is like a make or break for me. I just like fantasy, I like mythology, I like storytelling. So I would have loved to cover, again, more game lore. So again, I love Dragon Age, I like The Witcher. A lot of people keep mentioning The Dark Tower, which I will definitely get to reading and hopefully maybe cover. Actually, I'm not sure if probably I have a bunch of videos which are unlisted, but the oldest subscribers can probably remember that my channel actually started off as a mixture of Lord of the Rings and mythology content. Actually, and then I just branched off purely to Lord of the Rings. But I just like all fantasy in general, and I hope to actually make more of other types of content. I just don't know if it should be on this channel or on a different one. So Nathan asked who would win in a fight between Boromir and Aragorn. It's suggested in the books that Boromir is stronger, but Aragorn is more experienced and a better swordsman. I think Boromir's strength came from his build. Wide shoulders, he was like that sturdy build. But Aragorn is older, and Aragorn definitely has more experience. He rode with Theoden's father. He even served Gondor for a while with Boromir's grandfather, under his command. Yeah. So I think Aragorn would beat him purely on, as you mentioned, the experience, which made him a better swordsman. But I feel Boromir, we have to put respect to his name. His final scene, his death. The amount, I think there's like a pile of Uruk-hai bodies and orcs. He fought them single-handedly. It's respect to the guy. So Lirin asked, what do you think was the reason for Maedhros not choosing to return to Aman and attacking forces of, and why he chose to try to steal the Silmarils? I think honestly the fact he was the eldest son of Feanor, perhaps he felt even more responsibility, for his father's oath of needing to fulfill it. And in The Lord of the Rings, oaths, they're serious business. Failing one, it's not a good thing to do. Simply just take what happened to the Oathbreakers. They swore an oath on Ilúvatar's name, and so I don't think it's something that you can simply walk away from without facing repercussions. It's also worth mentioning that Maglor was said to be very similar to his mother, and his mother was a very sweet, empathetic lady, while Maglor and the rest of his brothers had their father's fire within them. So there was that character difference. So Florica mentioned, where do you think were the capitals of Cardolin and Rudar? That they must have had one. I imagine the capital of Cardolin must have been near the Tirn Gortad, which would eventually become the Barrow Downs. Their kings and princes used to be buried there. And from what we've seen in The Lord of the Rings, both in Edoras, and Minas Tirith, kings were typically buried close to the heart of their kingdom or the capital. So I imagine the capital of Cardolin was in that region. So perhaps close to the Old Forest, maybe closer to Bree. For Rudor, I have no idea honestly, since we don't have much information on the area. Thanks, Rob, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And also, guys, again, there's the mistake that in the videos I know it comes off as Carl, but my name is Carl, like Carl. I'm okay with both, but it's always worth clarifying. Bye bye, Jess, and thanks for joining us. So Derek asked, he mentioned of the audio issues and that the increase in quality came with it. Thanks, man. Again, it's a pity because when I look back, I used to be so preoccupied with my audio worries that I would have 3 hours of audio recorded for a 15 minutes video, which is mad. Now I get a 10-minute video done in 16 minutes, and it feels so much easier to edit. My voice gets less tired, so and I enjoy it more. It's less stressful for me. So Florica mentioned the thoughts on Fornost. Actually, this was something I was thinking about recently, trying to figure out, was Fornost as a capital as impressive as Annúminas? Was it as impressive as Osgiliath, as Minas Tirith? And to me, considering what the Northern Kingdom, for a while, it was equal to the Southern Kingdom. So it had to be on that scale. Unfortunately, when I used to think of Fornost, because of the Battle for Middle-earth games, I used to see it as almost a smaller outpost, which, not as significant. But, as I got older, I think Fornost was on that scale of Minas Tirith, of Osgiliath, of Annúminas, and it was like a really respectable and the most powerful city in the north. So Guess the Best asked, what would happen if Saruman succeeded in finding the One Ring? It's hard to say if he could, he would definitely have tried to challenge Sauron, and I don't know if he would have managed. We know for a fact that Galadriel could have probably challenged Sauron. Gandalf could have challenged him. So perhaps Saruman with the right army, and considering, he was a Maiar, he was a wizard, maybe he had enough strength to do so. What I think is that, just like Galadriel, at the end of the day, the ring would have corrupted him, even if Sauron was defeated, while Gandalf was one of the few people who was powerful enough to kind of sway the ring's loyalty, that there was a chance he could do so. And in that case, the One Ring would no longer answer to Sauron, and it would answer to him, even though he would still become corrupted. But I don't think Saruman would be able to do that. I think he'd just become very powerful. He could perhaps challenge Sauron, but he wasn't strong enough to sway the One Ring's loyalty, in my opinion. Yeah, Florica, in regards to Fornost, yeah, it's a fortress, but in these games which I used to play as a kid, the Battle for Middle-earth series, it was like a small city which you had to conquer in the Angmar campaign, and it had given me the wrong impression, or for a while I had gone with that thought. Again, I'm talking when I was 15 or something. So Dave asked, what feature of Valinor would you like to visit? Probably, I imagine the two trees, when they were healthy. I think it's quite a sight, all that light. Perhaps, the city of Tyrion, Tuna, those areas. But I think the two trees would be a magnificent sight. And the way they're described, it's something we wouldn't really be able to imagine as much. Yeah. Also, Dan, you mentioned about the outsourcing. Unfortunately, I had to outsource it in the past simply because I couldn't make time for it without publishing, let's say, once every 2 months or something. So luckily, since I fixed up my schedule, I got more efficient in recording and everything. I can actually do it myself, which I really missed, because I used to be really worried that when I record, when I was outsourcing it, I'd kind of lose my connection with my own community. And it was a big fear of mine, and it used to bother me. While now, it's like I'm back at it. It's very satisfying, and it's wholesome. I don't know. It's always a humbling experience to have a community. It's a beautiful thing. So let me just see where I am. So Derek asked, what do you think about non-canon lieutenants of Sauron, such as Agandur or the Black Captains in Shadow of Mordor? I don't have much of a problem with... No, I don't have any problem with them, to be honest, because realistically, Sauron had dark Numenorians in his service, and he probably gave them, these more embellished positions. And especially as a game, you do need these sorts of bosses. They stand out, they're cool. Just like I mentioned earlier, I forgot his name, but that kind of elven orc general in the Rings of Power was one of my favorite changes. I thought he was a brilliant addition. So I have no problem with them adding lieutenants and all that. I think it makes it more interesting. So Florica asked about what happened to Hildorian. So if I recall correctly, Hildorian was that land in the east, right? Where some of the first men awoke. I think Morgoth also had corrupted some elves over there, if I'm not mistaken. But again, as a land, since it was in the Far East, I imagine it would have fallen, under Morgoth's sway. And yeah, something. I imagine something like that. I don't know too much about what its eventual future, so I can't really give a thorough answer as much as I'd like to. But it's definitely, I imagine, under Morgoth's influence for the most part. Guys, honestly, I'm probably gonna wrap up the live stream soon, since I think we've been going for, let me see. I'm just trying to figure out where I can see the oh yeah, almost 2 hours. Honestly, I hope you guys enjoyed it. For me, it's something I've been meaning to do for ages, and I'd love to do more of them. So if it's something you guys enjoyed, if you have any feedback that you'd like me to change, or in the way things are presented, maybe you'd prefer me to give more thorough answers, maybe you'd like me to prepare some questions or points of discussion before. It's like really experimentative. From my part, I wouldn't want to just ramble on about a topic without involving you guys. So I'm just kind of experimenting and seeing where it goes. But yeah, so it's something, again, I'd be open if anyone wants to just even write a comment on future videos or here. Honestly, I'd love feedback just to do more in the future. Again, once a month would be fantastic if you guys enjoyed it always. And yeah, but again, for those of you who joined, no matter how long, if you've been here for the start, if you came for a few minutes, I really, really appreciate it. As always, it's very humbling. So thank you. Sorry, let me just read some more comments. Oh, thanks, Screenman. I appreciate it, and thanks everyone, guys. Well, I'll wrap it up then. Again, honestly, thanks to everyone who joined, and maybe as a small shout out, there's a ton of great Lord of the Rings content out there, and I wish I could mention all the channels, but it's hard to do them justice. So if you go on my tab on the community, there's a bunch of other Tolkien creators. You have Men of the West, you have Nerd of the Rings, you have The Red Book, The Philosopher's Games, Tolkien Untangled. There's just a ton. Honestly, we're lucky. As a community, I feel quality is there. There's so many great creators, and I notice, everyone, their heart is there. And maybe that's a testament to how awesome Lord of the Rings is as material. The people who cover it, they love it. And when you love something, it's hard not to try and do it justice. So if you guys want more of that content, check out all of those other channels, and go on my community tab and check them out. There's fabulous creators. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining, and it was fantastic. Again, any feedback for future live streams, feel free to write them in the comments, and in future videos or whatever, message me on Discord. Anything is cool. Any suggestions for future video topics, any improvements. I really want to grow or bring forward that community area. So yeah, sorry for my rambling, guys. Have a good night or good morning wherever you are. Good afternoon, I suppose, too. And thanks for joining. Bye-bye, guys.